What if the multiverse needed Goku Black's strength? What if the greatest threat to the multiverse became its only hope? What if Goku Black wasn't its destroyer but its savior? A warrior feared across timelines, now chosen to face a danger even greater than himself. This time, he won't fight for destruction. He'll fight to prove his strength stands above God's angels and fate itself. This isn't the fall of the multiverse in Dragon Ball Super. This is the rise of the one warrior powerful enough to save it. Jason Zylth, a man who died, is now having a conversa. Tion with the god selected to guide his soul to another realm. Can I go now? Obviously the conversation is going well. Listen, I know you're mad. I'm not mad, I just don't see the point in continuing this conversation. The young man said, interrupting whatever, comforting, words that the god was about to utter. Why not? It's not all bad. The god with a reassuring smile, wanting Jason to the hope even while he was in this bleak situation. I'm dead, Jason stated with a blank stare. You can be reincarnated, he says, more so questions, hoping that it would at least get his curiosity. Hearing this, Jason raised an inquisitive eyebrow. Really? Success? In Dragon Ball? The god revealed. Jason's face reverts back to its original blank appearance before muttering, oh god no. Fail. What? Oh, come on. Dragon Ball is the best universe. The god proclaimed with an almost kid-like tone. Besides, aren't you a big fan? I thought you would love to go there. I am a big fan. I love to watch it. Jason specified. But it would be an absolute nightmare to live in. That universe is filled to the brim with villains that can take out planets as if they were nothing more than ants. It's not all bad, the god said. Slowly realizing the point that Jason was making. That tone doesn't make me feel better, Jason muttered before looking at the god curiously. What? The god asked, suddenly feeling self-conscious. You're a Dragon Ball fanboy, aren't you? Jason asked with a raised eyebrow. The god's eyes suddenly widened before he started waving his hands in denial. What? What makes you say that? You look like a Saiyan with a god of destruction get up. Jason answered, pointing at the long, spiky blonde hair and the outfit the god was wearing. The god quickly looked down at himself before his eyes suddenly widened in some sort of realization. No, I just like this look. The god defended weakly. Jason looked at the god with a very amused look on his face as he nodded his head. I'm sure you do. The god stood there with a very embarrassed expression on his face, causing Jason to chuckle a bit. So how is this supposed to happen? Jason asked, looking arrow-ooned at the black void for anything out of the ordinary. Why a black void? Well, the god found the setting appropriate considering the circumstances, and the usual white is a little too bright for his liking. Is there like a portal or? Surprised by his question, the god stood up straight and couldn't help but ask, I thought you didn't want to go. Do I have a choice? Jason asked almost immediately after. Not really, he muttered, just barely loud enough for Jason to hear his answer. Then what use is there in complaining? Jason asked with a casual shrug of his shoulders. His eyes widening at the calm rationality that the mortal was exhibiting. The god absent-mindedly snapped his fingers, which caused a giant machine to appear in the middle of the two. Looking at it with a mix of curiosity and caution, Jason observed the machine for a few seconds before looking back at the god and asking, what is this thing? Step inside and all will be revealed. The god said cryptically as he held his arms towards the machine with dramatic flair. Jason raised an eyebrow and just stood there, waiting for an answer. Just please step inside, the god said. Jason looked towards the machine, then back to the god. Then back to the machine before letting out a loud sigh and stepping inside. The machine lights up and a beam of green light shines over the body of the young mortal, almost like it was scanning him. Is it supposed to feel tingly? Jason yelled over the sounds of the machine. Yes, it's completely normal. The god yelled back. After a few seconds, an image pops up on a monitor that was connected to the machine. The god went and looked at the picture, his eyes almost popping out of his head once he saw what was displayed. Well, that can't be right, he muttered softly to himself. Why is there a picture of Goku Black? Jason asked as he looked at the picture, now suddenly standing right next to the god. Seeing at how Jason was suddenly right next to him all of a sudden, the god flinched back at the unexpected close proximity before calming himself down and explaining. This is something new I wanted to try. Usually people just get casted into a new world with powers. I wanted to be a little more unique. He said with a little smile. So, seeing as how he still didn't explain anything, the god quickly added, the device scans you and sees which Dragon Ball character you are most compatible with. Quote. Jason furrowed his eyebrows at the god, making him a little uncomfortable before suddenly saying, but I'm not gay. The god flinches back at the weird state me. NT before looking back between him and the image of Goku Black and realizing where his statement came from. No, no, no. That's not what I meant. I meant which character is the most compatible for you to be reborn as. The god quickly explained, resolving any misconceptions the young mortal had. Oh, that makes a lot more sense. Jason said, now having the situation explained to him. He looks at the image with curiosity before asking. So I'm most compatible with Goku Black? Yes, the god answered hesitantly. Why? Jason asked, curious as to the reason he was compatible with a genocidal maniac. The god presses a button on the side of the scanner and the machine begins to whir as it prints out a long piece of paper. The god grabbed the paper and started to read from it. Apparently, the scanner saw that you have some similar qualities that make you compatible with Goku Black. Like what? Jason asked. Complete and utter disdain for the human race, he said, looking at Jason with a newfound sense of caution. Jason hears this description and he tilts his head a bit. Yeah, that checks out. He nodded his head with acceptance. You're not even going to deny it? The god asked. Why would I? It's true. Quote. Moving along from that can of worms, the god read more from the paper. It also says that you tend to enjoy causing physical bodily harm onto people. J. Asen thinks on this for a moment before nodding his head again at the assessment and looking back towards the image of Goku Black. So what does all this compatibility stuff mean? He questioned. Well, you can either choose to be reincarnated as Goku Black, the god said with obvious apprehension. Or as yourself, but I will give you any 4 things you wish for, if you choose Goku Black. He too. LD him quickly before he could choose himself. That's an odd number, Jason muttered, his eyebrows furrowing. Technically it's an even number, the god says, looking away from Jason as he didn't want NT to be subjected to his questioning gaze. Jason sees that the god grew nervous and asked the question on his mind, and why is that you're giving me wishes? The god snapped his fingers, causing the machine and paper in his hands to disappear before he turned his gaze back towards Jason to answer his question. Well, you would be the first mortal that I would reincarnate in someone else's body. I wanted to make it a special occasion. Quote. Jason looks at the god with narrowed eyes, not believing a word of that. What the has anyone ever told you that you're a very untrusting person? The god asked once he saw Jason's suspicious gaze. No one has ever taken you up on the offer, have they? The god's eyes widen once more before he slumped over with a depressed sigh. No. Did you offer them wishes too? Jason asked a follow-up question. Yeah. First I offered them 1 wish, then 2, then 3. None have taken it yet. He answered with a tone of sadness. His answer caused Jason to look at him with a raised eyebrow. What characters are so bad that they would rather start with nothing than a pre-existing character with wishes? Well, they don't exactly start with nothing. Like if you chose to be reincarnated as yourself, you would still be reincarnated with something unique about you. He said, rubbing the back of his neck. Something unique? Jason questions. Yeah, it depends on the universe you head into. Since you're heading into Dragon Ball, you'll have a set of predetermined choices to choose from. He said as he pulled out a futuristic data pad from out of nowhere. Quote. Legendary Super Saiyan Majin and Super Namekian. Those are without wishes, yeah? Jason asked, not liking any of those options if so. Nodded the god. Then I think I'm good. The god shrugs and drops the pad on the floor. Instead of hitting the floor normally, the pad just disappears from the room entirely before it could hit the ground. Well, those are your choices. He stated before going on to explain further. Everyone gets something different. If you had Naruto then you could choose your clan. If you had One Piece then you could choose a devil fruit. If you had. Okay, I think I got it, thanks. Jason interrupted the god before he could continue on with his rambling. My bad, the god apologized as he rubbed the back of his neck with an awkward smile. It's fine. Jason waved it off. But you still didn't answer my question. What characters did they matched with that were so bad that they turned down wishes? He asked once more. The god scratches his cheek, the person. I offered one wish to was heading to Naruto and the scanner had picked Naruto. That one made Jason scratch his head on confusion. What's so bad about Naruto? He asked. His childhood, the god replied blankly. Jason gains a look of realization and nods, agreeing with whoever rejected it. If he had been treated the way that Naruto was, he would have just given in to the Kyuubi just so he could see them all die. And the second person, quote, he was heading into DXD and he matched with Issei Hyudo, the god added. Jason facepalms at this bit of information. Aren't we getting reborn? Doesn't that mean he could have just not been a pervert? He asks. I told him that, but he said that it was about the principle, the god answered. That answer caused Jason to let out a loud groan. I'm almost afraid to ask about the last one. The last guy, who I offered 3, was heading to Berserk. Guts. Jason guesses immediately. That last one was honestly pretty obvious considering the universe. No one wants to be Guts. No one that's sane anyway. Yeah, the god said with a sigh. Jason nodded his head in understanding. No amount of wishes can make that shit worth it. You know that, right? He asks the god. Yeah, I know, the god answers. Having gotten his answers, Jason looks at the image of Goku Black and then back to the god. Fine, I'll take Black, but only because my other choices aren't that appealing. He says with a shrug of his shoulders. What about Legendary Super Saiyan? The god asked curiously. I don't get wishes, right? Which means I have to gain control of Legendary Super Saiyan on my own. Jason asked, to which the god nodded his head. That alone is enough for me to not want it. And which version of Legendary Super Saiyan is it? The god summoned the pad and read from it again. Going into the fine print. The Z version. You mean the version that turns you into a genocidal berserker all while slowly killing you because of the overwhelming amount of power. The god nods slowly and Jason shakes his head. Yeah, Goku Black is honestly the best option out of the 4. Yeah, honestly that's probably your best option. The god sighed. Plus, you get 4 wishes. So it's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah, but I'd still much rather have gotten reincarnated into something more peaceful, Jason muttered before thinking about his wishes. He knew that they needed to be ones that help him both in the short and long term, but there isn't anything he could think of that would help him out that much early on. Is there any way to make me stronger than the average Saiyan? He asked the god after drawing some blanks. There's one, the god said hesitantly. What is it? You could wish to be an ancient Saiyan instead of a regular one. Why? Our transformations will be more powerful, but they'll also be harder to master. He told the young mortal. Why's that? What makes an ancient Saiyan so much more powerful? Jason asked. Well, it's because ancient Saiyans have the innate ability to draw out every ounce of power from the Super Saiyan transformations. But the trade-off is that your rage will be a lot harder to gain control of than if you were just a normal Saiyan. He explained. Jason ponders on it for a moment before asking another question, how much more powerful are the transformations? Double, answered the god. So let's say I obtained Super Saiyan 3. Instead of a 400x multiplier. You'll get a 800x multiplier, yes. Plus another 1.6x boost when you actually master the forms since the time it takes to master the transformations are considerably longer. So that would bring it up to, the god trails off as a calculator appears in his hands. Mastering Super Saiyan 3 is a 1.6x multiplier, he mumbles to himself as he inputs the numbers onto the calculator. Jason raised an eyebrow at the sight before him. He never thought a god would need to use a calculator, but I guess even gods need help when dealing with math. 800 times 1.6a1. 280x multiplier in Super Saiyan 3. He said, causing Jason's eyes to go as wide as saucers. Not anywhere near the legendary Super Saiyan transformation in terms of power, but it's a good trade-off for something more controllable. He added, I'll take your entire stock. Jason yells, finding the trade-off extremely worth it. You sure? The god asked, a little put off by Jason's burst of enthusiasm. Entire stock, he said, emphasizing each word. All right. Jesus Christ, you don't have to go all caps. The god muttered to himself, but Jason heard it just a little bit. All what? Nothing, he said immediately, causing Jason to look at him weirdly before deciding to move on. "I'm just going to think about my other wishes now," said Jason, wanting this weird encounter to be over as soon as possible. "Yeah, that would be best." The god agrees. Jason thinks about his wishes for a long while before saying his second wish. "For my second wish, I want 3 techniques," he said as he held up 3 fingers. "Whoa there, pal. You can't wish for that. It's against the rules," the god said quickly. Jason raises an eyebrow and tilted his, "But you never established any rules." The god's eyes widen. Since no one has ever taken his offer, he'd completely forgot to establish any rules. "Fine. I'll accept your wish since I forgot to establish rules, but no more wishing for multiple skills in one wish. And no wishing for any overpowered transformations either." "Okay then, that's fine, wasn't gonna ask for transformations anyway," said Jason with a confused expression. "Good," yelled out the god. Dot, dot, dot. There was an awkward silence. "So can I say which techniques I want now?" Jason asked. Yeah," the god said nervously, not really sure if he wanted to know what techniques he was going to ask for. "Kekai," Jason said, putting down one finger. The god's nerves unwinded a bit after hearing that. "Okay. Done." The god accepted. "Kaioken," he said, putting down a second finger. The god started to get nervous again. Couldn't you just learn it from King Kai?" the god asks, hoping to persuade him not to wish for it. "That means going to the afterlife. I don't plan on dying ever again," Jason stated. Although disappointed that he couldn't talk him out of it, Kaioken isn't that much of a problem to get worked up about. It might help him a bit early on, but it's not gonna be any more use to him again until he reaches the Super Saiyan God forms. "Okay. Done. What's the last one?" the god asked. Kai. Jason answered, putting down his third and last finger. "Glass shatter." "What the hell was that?" exclaimed Jason, looking around at his surroundings. "We're in a void, how is glass able to shatter? There isn't anything for it to shatter against." Jason shouted out to no one in particular. The god, however, is still trying to process his wish. "You can't really expect me to honor that request." Upon hearing the god, Jason stopped trying to argue with the non-existent laws of physics of the void and turned to him with a raised eyebrow. "You didn't say I couldn't wish for skills that only Kaioshans use," Jason told him. "And even if you had, you broke the rule yourself when you agreed to give me the Kaioken," he added. The god could only hang his head and accept the wish. He was right after all. "Done, please just make your other 2 wishes now." "Okay then," Jason said as he shrugged his shoulders. "For my next wish, I want 3 Ensenji fruits." "Oh no. I said you can't wish for multiple things in one wish," the god yelled at the young mortal as he pointed at him. "No you didn't. You said that I can't wish for multiple techniques or skills in one wish. You never said anything about items," Jason pointed out. The god's eyebrow twitched in anger as he was now struggling to keep his composure. "Fine. But no more wishing for multiple items in one wish either." "Okay." Jason agreed easily. The god narrowed his eyes at him, not trusting this mortal at all. But he was so mentally drained due to this interaction that he now wishes that it would just end. "Hurry up and make your last ridiculous wish so I can go watch anime," he said depressingly. Jason raises an eyebrow at his dejected tone, but doesn't really think anything about it all that much. It wasn't his fault that he was exploiting loopholes. He's a mortal. "Exploiting is what we do. A pouch of unlimited senzu beans," he said, just as the god was about to object until he realizes that he would be wasting his breath. A pouch of unlimited senzu beans doesn't count as multiple items. It counts as one. A pouch. A singular pouch. He chose his wording very carefully. "Glass shatter. Seriously, what the fuck is that?" Jason yelled, once again looking around at his surroundings. Only this time he was doing it quicker, trying to spot whatever it is making the noise. "Just my ever-deteriorating sanity, don't worry about it." The god snaps his fingers and 2 items appear out of thin air. The first being what looks like to be a time ring and the other looks like a Patara earring, but instead of green, the gem is purple. "Those hold your items. The earring holds the fruits, while the ring holds the pouch of senzu beans," the god explains in a monotone voice. "Just open your hand, think of the pouch, and it will appear in your hand. For the fruit, just touch the earring and hold out your hand." It'll appear just like the pouch. Are you okay? Jason asks, feeling quite put off by the god's sudden change in mood. I'm fine, he says as he pinches the bridge of his nose. Alright. First things first, you'll be born on planet Vegeta. You're both Raditz's and Goku's older brother. You'll also be born with a basic understanding of ki control, how to suppress it, and basic ki blasts. Anything else you'll have to learn of your own. Jason nods his head before asking a question, what power level will I be born with? Around 2 or 3,000. The god answered. Isn't the king going to want to kill me then? Jason asked with a confused expression. The king only did that because he was jealous that someone was more powerful than his son. You'll be born before Vegeta, so he'll have no reason to kill you, the god said, putting Jason's worries at ease. Jason nods and continues listening to the god. Now, giving techniques is usually painful. Having knowledge shoved into your head isn't really pleasant on the brain. However, I will give you the knowledge when your brain develops in the womb. You should already know the technique. UES when you obtain consciousness for the first time. The god explained further. Thanks for that, Jason said, grateful that the god is considerate enough to make the integration painless. There's something else I should tell you about. The god suddenly brought up. Jason raises an eyebrow. What's that? Goku Black is unique. His Zenkai boost isn't normal. Regular Saiyans get stronger when they recover from near death. Black's Zenkai works like that, but it also increases as he fights. The more damage he takes, the higher his power rises. Basically, it happens during the battle instead of happening after the battle. There's also the other thing, the god trails off. What? Goku Black is kind of a god. Well, his soul is, but his body isn't. So to fully make you Goku Black, I'll need to have the soul of a god, Jason said, cutting him off. The god nods his head and Jason lets out a sigh, and how is that going to happen? It's not that difficult. Although you're gonna feel so. Me burning, the god said with a little hesitation. How bad? He asks. Ranging from mild heartburn to, kill me now, the god said, although his tone phrased it as more of a question than an answer. Great, Jason mutters to himself. The god appears directly in front of Jason, causing him to jump back slightly. Sorry about this. The hood apologizes as he put his palm on Jason's chest. A lie. Blue color shines through Jason's body. As the god does whatever he's doing, Jason starts to feel the burning sensation that he was warned about. Oh, this isn't that bad, Jason stated as he only felt a small bit of warmth. This is the easy part, the god told him. The light shining from his body starts to shift from light blue to dark purple. Fuck. As more of the blue starts to shift, the burning pain Jason feels starts to grow more and more painful until he couldn't hold it in anymore. RRRRGH, Jason groaned in pain. Just a few more seconds. Almost all the blue has disappeared and turned into dark purple. The pain has now risen to unfathomable levels. Ah! Jason screamed out in absolute agony. 3, 2, 1. The god takes his palm away from Jason's chest, causing Jason to fall to the ground or float in the air, considering they're in a void. Please tell me that it's over, he says as he clutches his chest. Yeah, it's over, the god said, looking at Jason with a worried expression. Jason nods his head, but doesn't try to move himself upright. He looks at his arms, trying to feel anything new. Am I supposed to feel different? I don't feel different, he asked. No, it's your soul. It's the same as it always was, it's just a different energy making it up now, the god explained. Jason nods, taking a moment to catch his breath. After a few minutes, Jason turns upright and asks, so what now? This is where my job ends and yours begins, he says, holding up his hand, ready to snap his fingers. Bye. The god bids him farewell with a smile before snapping his fingers. Jason gets sucked into a rift in space-time and disappears into his new life. Seeing that the interaction was now over, the god let out a tired sigh and summoned a couch for him to slump onto. You really got played like a fiddle. Didn't you, Astral? The god, now known as Astral, turns around and sees another god in golden armor walking through a golden portal. It's not my fault. I never had anyone take me up on my wish thing. I've forgotten all the rules, Astral exclaimed. It's fine, Astral. I'm not mad. Astral lets out a sigh and the god in golden armor lets out a chuckle. Putting his hand on Astral's shoulder, He says some comforting words. Don't fret. You're still learning the ins and outs of reincarnating mortals. We'll chalk it up as a learning experience. Astral nodded his head, relieved that he wasn't in trouble. The armored god looked at Astral up and down. Also, why are you taking on that form? I thought it was cool, Astral answers, embarrassed at the fact that his leader caught him in the Saiyan form that he uses from time to time. Yes, well, carry on, the armored god said before leaving through another golden portal. Astral lets out a sigh before reverting back to his true form. Maybe Hesh and his reincarnator will watch some more anime with me, he mutters before disappearing to whatever his brother god was currently inhabiting. On planet Vegeta, the scenery of a beautiful desert landscape could be seen in its full beauty. The rising sun, the beautiful rocks and mountain ranges scattered across the land. Truly a beautiful thing to behold. A child flies through the sky at a terrifying speed, smashing into a large butte and getting buried deep inside. The butte, unable to handle such an intense collision, collapsed in on itself and buried the child deep within. Geez, you sure are going hard on the little squirt today, Bardock. I know, right? I'm starting to feel bad for the little guy. He can handle it. Quit your whining. Rog. The three Saiyans turned their attention back towards the fallen child, seeing that he raised his power to blast himself out from underneath the rubble. See. Bardock look. Ed at his child with a face that could only be described as pride, while the other two Saiyans just shook their heads at the kid's stubborn refusal to back down. These two Saiyans are Fasha and Taro, two members of the low-class elite team known as Team Bardock. Now free from the rubble, the child slowly rises up from the ground, reaching the altitude of where his father and the other two Saiyans were floating. That all you got, old man? The child goaded his father, panting throughout his words. This kid. Bardock let out a smirk and dashed towards his son, the two clashing in a flurry of punches and kicks. Meanwhile, one of the two observing Saiyans let out a sigh as these two fought. The squirt doesn't know his own limits, Fasha seethed, having seen this battle one too many times before. What? You worried about him or something? Tora teased the female Saiyan floating beside him. No, but he could learn to take a break. Look at him, he can barely stand. Fasha exclaimed, pointing towards the bloodied child. Ah, look at Fasha, the ever-doting aunt. Why don't you go a kiss it better? I'm sure that. Suddenly, they felt as if a danger signal went off in their heads and split off from each other. A yellow beam attack went by the middle of the two. If they had dodged a second later, they would have definitely been hit by the blast. Using my own move on me. You cocky, little brat, they heard Bardock off in the distance. Damn, that was almost a trip to the medical machine, Tora sighed out in relief before feeling danger once more. What was that you were gonna say before? Fasha asked, cracking her knuckles. Upon hearing her voice, Tora turned around and saw that Fasha had somehow gotten behind him during the confusion. Hey, now you aren't mad about a little teasing, are ya? Tar asked, raising his hands in surrender. She was indeed a little mad. A loud smack echoed throughout the valley, which was then followed by a grunt of absolute agony. Damn it, woman, can't you see I'm injured enough? I yelled towards Fasha, rubbing the back of my head. Apparently not too injured to mouth off, ya brat. She shouts, winding her hand back to hit me again. Enough. You'll get your chance tomorrow, Fasha. My father said, causing a slight shiver to run up my spine. I slowly turned towards Fasha and saw that she had an evil-looking smirk on her face. Hey, old man, yo. You know that mother would be mad if I died, I said to him, trying to get out of training with Fasha. An angry Bardock is something that is very threatening to one's health, but an angry Fasha. I wouldn't wish that on my. Actually, I would wish that on my worst enemy, but I wouldn't wish it upon myself. You'll be fine. One trip to the medical machine before we go home will fix you right up. He sighed before looking towards the woman who will subject me to her ire tomorrow. Probably. We finally arrived home, seeing Jine already inside cooking dinner. Fasha and Tora had already went their separate ways before we arrived. We're back, Bardock said as we entered. Jine smiles at the both of us before her smile turned to a frown at the sight of my battered form. Didn't I tell you two to take it easy? She asked as she let out a sigh. Tell it to him, he's the one that kept getting back up. Bardock told her whilst pointing his thumb at me. Jine and I both stared at him with blank expressions. Feeling our gazes, Bardock cleared his throat and tried to look as if he wasn't at fault. Jine shakes her head at him before looking at me and saying, "Zylf, dinner will be ready in an hour. Why don't you go and get some rest until then?" I nodded, giving her a little smile before heading to my room. It wasn't anything glamorous, but it was leagues better than where we were living in before. King Vegeta had us moved into the area where Saiyan elites usually reside at. Obviously it wasn't out of the goodness of his heart, as it was just a better environment for me to hone my power. A pair. NTLY when King Vegeta doesn't have a son to be jealous for, he's actually quite accommodating to the child who might be enough to kill Frieza when properly nurtured. The king gave orders to Bardock to train me as soon as I was let out of the incubator. He thinks if I'm brought up correctly, I could be his secret weapon against Frieza. Good luck with that. By the time I fight Frieza, Planet Vegeta will be dead and gone. Hopefully the king too if the universe doesn't decide to pull a butterfly effect. As much as I appreciate the help of the king, I would rather him and the planet be buried. No telling how events might shift if they were to both survive. The year was 734. If events were still taking place as the canon, then Goku would be born in 3 years. Which means that Planet Vegeta's destruction would either be in 3 or 5 years. I don't which specifically because of the damn Super Broly movie jumbling the timeline. Originally, Planet Vegeta's destruction happened near Goku's birth. But in the movie, Goku looked at least 2 years old when it happened. I guess there really isn't a way for me to find out until it happens. I'm just hoping that it will be in 739, as it will. Give me an extra 2 years of prep time. I let out a sigh before raising my right hand, holding my palm towards my chest. I cast Kekai, which repairs my damaged Saiyan armor. The design is simple enough. It's basically what every Saiyan child wears except that I have long pants instead of shorts. The golden parts of the armor were also replaced with a light green color. After repairing my damaged clothes, I then opened my hand and caused the pouch of unlimited senzu beans to appear. I took one out and ate it before the pouch disappeared back into the earring. My injured body was brought back up to full strength. And I could immediately feel that my power level had risen. It wasn't much, maybe 200 or 300, but it was enough for now. I had a power level of 2500 when I was born. I'm 4 years old now. And my power level had reached over 9000 about a month ago. It aggravated me to no end how slow my growth was, but there was little I could do about it now. Bardock was the best teacher I could have gotten. But being his son had a few downsides. One of them being that he won't push me to my absolute limit. He would push me, that's for damn sure, but he won't push me to the point of near death for the Zenkai fully take hold. I've been getting by with Goku Black's unique ability to grow whilst in battle, but the gain keeps getting lower each time as Bardock refuses to just absolutely demolish me. I had tried once to abuse Kaioken to bring my body to near death and recover with a senzu bean, but the sudden burst of energy nearly killed me instantly. The pain felt as if someone had plunged their hand into my chest and had a vice grip on my heart. It was so intense that I could barely swallow the senzu bean that I had preemptively put in my mouth. After that near-death experience, I decided then and there that I should wait on using Kaioken like that until I had someone who I could trust to feed me a senzu bean, if I ever pushed myself that hard again. It would slow the growth of my power level for sure. But it was better to do that than rush in head first and die before canon even starts. After an hour, Jine had called me for dinner. It wasn't anything luxurious. There was just basically a pile of meat with some sort of greens on the side that barely anyone except me ate. While Jine was more reserved when it came to eating, Bardock went the traditional Saiyan way of eating. Which meant that he basically just stuffed it down his gourd and hoped he didn't choke on it. In the anime, these scenes were generally light-hearted and funny. Now that I'm actually witnessing this right before my eyes, I understand why people were either shocked or grossed out by this. As we were enjoying the atmosphere, the front door opened and we were met with the sight of my younger brother, Raditz. "You're late, Raditz," Bardock said, not even looking up from his food. "My bad, I was out training," he exclaimed proudly, looking over at me for some type of validation. Ever since he came out of the incubator, Raditz had put me on some sort of pedestal in his mind. It was due to this pedestal that he had started training heavily in an attempt to try and keep up with me. I don't know whether he wanted validation, or rivalry, or something else entirely, but it was amusing to see him rising higher than what was originally planned. His power level right last week had just passed 500. Which isn't a lot, but considering that his adult power level was 1600, he'll definitely be a fair bit stronger than he was in canon. Not anywhere near Vegeta, mind you, but it's not a stretch to say that he'll probably close in on Nappa. Seeing as how he is bettering himself, I give him a nod of approval. Seeing this, he smirks and goes to sit at the table, walking as if he's a main character of a shonen. You should probably stop doing that until you are stronger than a Saibaman. We all went to bed after eating dinner. Well, everyone else did. As soon I climbed into bed, I assumed the lotus position. The reason for this is so I could meditate and channel my ki. While I admit that it probably won't really help me immediately, it will most certainly help me out in the long run. Meditation was the sole reason why Jiren was so much more powerful than Goku and Vegeta during the Tournament of Power. At least that's what was stated in the manga. Enough time meditating allowed Jiren to effectively use his power in a way that he seemed more monstrous than he really was. In terms of raw power, Goku and Vegeta were near Jiren's level. But it was because Jiren had used Meditat Ion to refine his usage of ki that he was so much more powerful than them. I don't exactly know the specifics as it wasn't really that well explained, but if meditation allowed me to better use my ki, then I'll definitely try. After meditating for a few hours, I stopped for the night and headed off to sleep. I was later awoken about 6 hours later by my mother shaking me awake. "Zylf, wake up, sweetie," she muttered softly, trying to wake me as pleasantly as possible. "Mom, what is it? Training isn't supposed to be until a few hours," I said, wondering why she was the one waking me up. "It's better if you just go and see for yourself," she said, giving me a smile before walking out of the room. I rub my eyes and get out of bed, grabbing my armor from the floor and putting it on. I walk out of my room and see that there was another Saiyan waiting there for me. "Zylf?" he asked, looking to confirm my identity. "Yes, who are you?" I asked. "I was sent here by His Majesty, King Vegeta. He wishes to see you in the throne room immediately," he said, causing me to lift an eyebrow. "The king? I haven't had an audience with him since last year." "Well, let's not keep him waiting," I said. The unknown Saiyan nods and gestures for me to follow him outside. "Stay safe, Zylf," Jine said worriedly. I look back and see my family standing behind me. My mother had a worried look, Raditz seemed to be confused. And Bardock just looked at me with a blank stare. I nod at them before following the other Saiyan out of my house and towards the castle. The throne seemed to have been more or less the same. It was the same as it looked in the Brawly movie, which was honestly not that impressive. It was just a long hallway with a long strip of red carpet that led to a needlessly big chair with H2 spikes protruding out the top of it. As we entered, there were multiple Saiyans standing off to the side. Some of them were familiar, some of them weren't, but they were all powerful. If I had to put a number, I would guess that their power levels were all around 5,000 to 7,000. The highest power level in the room was obviously the king, who I had felt to be around 10,000. I was honestly disappointed with the king's power when I had first felt it. Now, however, I am even more disappointed. It seemed that training was really only a thing that low-class Saiyans did, and even they barely did any. When I had heard a rumor that my father's power level rivaled the king, I just thought it was nothing. Then I met the king and found out for myself that the rumors are actually true. King Vegeta and Bardock's power level are almost exact the same. It almost feels weird. I have been doing my due diligence not to piss this guy off, but I will most likely grow stronger than him in the next few months. No doubt you are wondering why you have been summoned. The king suddenly spoke. "Yes, your majesty," I responded respectfully. Doesn't really matter what his power level was, he was still the king. Besides, he would be dead in a few years. A few years of mindless posturing isn't so bad when we barely have any interaction. "First, there is something I would like to see," he said as he let out a scouter and placed it on his ear. I quickly raised my power level to a decently high amount and let it stay there. The king looked directly at me and pressed down the button on the side on his scouter. A few seconds of silence passes before he smirks and removes the scouter. Over 7,000. You have grown well since I last saw you. Good. He praised. Some of the other Saiyans in the room most fell on their faces when they heard the number. Only a handful of them weren't all that surprised. There's a planet that seems to be causing trouble for our standard troops. I'm sending you there, in order to see if you can make the inhabitants more amicable. He says, causing me to be a little confused. Not by the order, that was self-explanatory. Go there and kill everything. What confused me was the order itself. The king ordered me to go on a mission before, but now he's sending me on a mission that had a high probability of death. It was blatantly obvious what his intention was. He's sending me out to my death. I figured he would try something eventually. The birth of Vegeta pretty much sealed it, but I guess it was happening sooner rather than later. Of course, the high amount of danger that this mission poses allows for some benefits for when you ultimately return. He says, benefits? I asked, curious as to what he meant. Do you remember what you had requested the last time you were summoned here? He asked, to which I nodded. I'll grant your request and leave him under your tutelage. He stated, as if you had no intentions of granting it in the first place. Still, appearances and all that. I quickly kneeled down to the floor and bowed my head. Your Majesty, that is truly too generous. I said to him, nonsense. High risk should be met with a high reward. He replied, waving his hand. He motioned his head towards some of the Saiyans and they hurriedly left the throne room. They will prepare everything for you. I suggest speaking to your father. He should have his orders by now. He said, my father. I quickly got up and bowed my head towards the king before walking out of the throne room. As I walked out, I saw my father waiting for me beyond the doors. Seems as though you are going out on your first mission, and it's a highly rated one at that. He said with a sigh. The king has given me orders to teach you something that should help you wipe out the inhabitants. Follow me, he added before walking off. Now I'm genuinely confused. I don't know what he's teaching me, but if it's at all helpful then I have no idea what it is that the king is planning. It would be better if I went it as unprepared as possible if he wants me gone. I followed Bardock outside to the docking bay and saw that there was a ship waiting for us. We're flying to one of the moons. What I'm going to teach you is too destructive to have you train it on planet Vegeta. He told me. Too dangerous. There's no way that he's talking about what I think he is he? We entered the ship, flew a couple hours to one of the moons that were orbiting planet Vegeta. We landed at what looked like an enormously large training area. I also saw that it was completely empty except for us. This is a training area exclusively for high-class Saiyans to train while in the Great Ape state. He said, causing me some surprise. It is what I was thinking. Is he going to try and teach me how to remain in control while in the Great Ape form? This is what the king ordered him to teach me. Are the inhabitants of the planet so strong that they surpass my power even as a Great Ape? Or is he simply just not trying to have me killed? As you know, Saiyans transform into a Great Ape when we stare at the moon that's orbiting a planet, but the planet you're going to doesn't have a moon. He explained. He then told me to stay where I was before walking towards the center of the training area. The technique I'm about to show you will help with that little problem. He said as he held out his hand and a white sphere appeared in his palm. Ah, that's nostalgic. I remember Vegeta using this against Goku in the Saiyan saga. The power ball. Watch me closely, very closely. He told me. Before sending the power ball towards the sky. Burst open and mix. The power ball burst open and a bright white energy started to shine from the above. I made sure to observe the technique carefully. Before closing my eyes at the last possible second and prevent myself from transforming. Transforming right now would be a very bad thing. Bardock's power level was about 100,000 when in his Great Ape form. Thanks to my ancient Saiyan heritage, my power level would far outclass my father at a staggering 180,000. Since I had never once transformed into a Great Ape, I would most definitely go berserk and attack anything in sight. Including Bardock. As much as I would love to start mastering the form, I'd rather wait until committing patricide was no longer an issue. Seems as though you're aware of the downside of transforming. I hear the familiar, but drastically deeper, voice of my father. Yeah, you lose control and attack everything in sight until there's nothing left. I replied. Sound of a blast goes off and an explosion rings out. Open your eyes, he told me. I do as he said and I was met with the absolutely massive sight of Great Ape Bardock. To say that he towered over me was an understatement. I could only guess that this was the feeling that ants had when they looked at us. The technique I just showed you is called the power ball. It's formed by combining your energy with the planet's atmosphere. But don't start thinking that it's something that you can use lightly. The technique drains you quickly, that's why it's always better to just use a natural moon, but you don't have that luxury. It's better to use it only when you have no other options. Got it? He asked. I nodded. Good. Now go ahead and try to do it yourself. And try and keep your eyes closed. D'd rather not have to explain to your mother why I brought you home unconscious. He said. Oh, if only you knew. After I learned the power ball, Bardock had carry my unconscious body home anyway. He wasn't kidding when he said that the technique drains you. Luckily I had managed to perform it perfectly before I had lost consciousness. As I woke up the next day, there was already a few high-class Saiyans outside my house waiting to escort me to the docking bay. To my surprise, there was a lone Saiyan waiting for me there next to a fairly decently sized ship. Colonel Paragus, I'm surprised that you are here to see me off, I said as I bowed my head. I'm here to inform you about a change of plans. Instead of using a pod that we usually send our troops out in, we're sending you out in this shish. It that I assigned for you to make use of, he said, causing me to look at him with a little surprise. That's generous of you, Colonel. I said to him. Generosity has nothing to do with it. You are the best chance that my son has. And I'll do as much as I can to help you succeed in this task. He stated with a no-nonsense tone. I forget that he genuinely cared for Broly before his hate boner for King Vegeta came into the equation. I understand, I said before walking up the stairs to head aboard the ship. Zylf. Hearing my name being called out, I turned around and saw that my family were all standing behind me. Be careful. Make sure to come home safe. Jine yelled, worry dripping from her words. Make sure to kick their ass, bro. Raditz yelled out, getting a smack to the back of the head by our mother. I chuckled a bit at the sight before turning towards my father. He didn't say a word. He only looked at me in the eyes and nodded his head. I nodded back at him before walking up the stairs and sitting down at the controls. The ships already had the planet's coordinates pre-programmed, so all I had to do was press a button and let the ship's autopilot do the work. The STAIRS to the ship ascended and the ship's thrusters ignite. I looked out the window and saw that my family was still there, watching me as I left. The ship ascends out of planet Vegeta's atmosphere, and I'm now left in with nothing but the silence of space. Looking around, I smirked as I was now all alone with no one watching. Using Kekai, I materialized weights on my arms and legs and was ready to finally begin some grueling. It'll take 1 month to travel to planet N937. That means that the journey to and back will take at least 2 months. 2 months of unrestricted training, and I'm going to make it count. With a scouter that was already prepared for me on the ship, I raised my power to its maximum and pushed the button on the side of the scouter. The iconic sound rings in my ear and the numbers on the scouter start rising before it stops on 12,378. With this amount of power, I could honestly take care of King Vegeta with barely any issue. Not like I have no interest in the shitstorm that would cause. But I could if I wanted to. I started off slow in the beginning, only conjuring weights that were 100 pounds apiece and making them heavier as the strain became easier. The weights that are on my arms and legs currently were 600 pounds each. A far cry from Goku's 40,000 pound feat near the Majin Buu saga, but I haven't exactly had as many years of training. As I ducked the weight back to 0 and took off the bands, I hear an alert come from the ship's computer. I sat down at the helm to see what was happening and saw that there was only 24 hours left until the ship would enter the planet's atmosphere. Only a day left, I muttered as I took off the scouter and placed it on the console. I don't know what awaits me on the planet I'm heading to. But I'm fairly confident that my current level of power should be enough. The information given to me by the ship's computer said that the inhabitants were very technologically advanced, but their average power levels were around 300. Even so, I should obviously still be cautious. There were 3 separate Saiyan teams that were sent there, 2 low class and 1 mid class, and all of them failed due to unknown circumstances. What piqued my curiosity, however, was that the highest power level scanned on the planet was around 150. So whatever happened to the Saiyans that had landed there, they certainly weren't overpowered. Even a low-class Saiyan warrior has a power level of around 1000. An ambush maybe would stand to reason that a technologically advanced race would have thought of several contingency plans in case of an attack, especially if they were caught by surprise by the first attempt. If that was the case, then I would need to anticipate it. If worst comes to worst, I just use the power ball technique and transform into a great ape. I would rather not have to use a transformation that causes me to lose control, but my life is a lot more important than my comfort. The ship finally arrived at the planet's exosphere. I looked through the window and finally laid eyes on the planet I was sent to conquer. It is completely different from what Earth and planet Vegeta looked like. The planet seemed to have a rocky surface that made its appearance seem gray. There were also these strange blue clouds that were covering most of the planet. It almost looked beautiful in a way. But I guess traveling in space would make one sentimental. Especially if it was their first time. Strangely enough, I wasn't as enamored by space as I thought I would be. I remember that I was always curious as to what it would be like among the stars in my past life, but right now I don't really seems to care. I gave confirmation for the ship to start the landing sequence and started to descend to the ground. The descent itself was uneventful, as I only passed through some of the blue clouds and saw some freakish lizard-like birds. As the ship touched down, I immediately got up from my chair, grabbed my armor and prepared myself to exit the ship. Before I left, I made sure to place a senzu bean in my mouth as a precaution. The doors to the ship opened and I walked down the ramp. Looking around at my surroundings, I saw nothing but rocky gray mountains off in the distance. The blue clouds overhead seemed to be generating a lightning storm. That's weird. That lightning wasn't visible from. I'm cut off by a blue beam suddenly appearing in front of me and a searing pain coming from my chest. Off in the distance, 2 figures close in on the position of the alien ship that has invaded their planet. Both of them were holding what looked to be snipers in their hands. Filthy Saiyans don't know when to quit. Just means there are more ships for us gather and study. As primitive as those beasts are, their technology is very fascinating. Their medical machines, especially, could evolve our medical systems by several decades. Sometimes I wonder why you were assigned to the military. My scores were exceptionally average. They closed in on the alien vessel, choosing to first take a look at the Saiyan that was laying face down on the ground. Do you think that it is normal that they have sent only one Saiyan? Our first encounter had a team of 5. The third had a team of 3. Why was only one sent this time? Could be a Saiyan of a higher class. His ship seems to be more advanced than the first 3 encounters. Yes, but the ship they arrived in during third encounter was also more advanced than the first 2 and they still had more than one Saiyan on board. Look man, I don't know. I'm a military officer. I shoot things, not think about them. The more inquisitive of the 2 went silent for a moment before walking towards the ship. The other let out a sigh before kneeling down and checking over the body of the Saiyan. Intercept to command. Saiyan invader has been terminated. We are returning now with the craft. As he finished his report on the situation, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his throat. He began coughing blood of a blue color, hearing an unknown voice speaking to him. That fucking hurt. That fucking hurt, I said as I pushed my key blade deeper into his throat. This was something that I was working on during my training on the ship. I obviously couldn't train 24/7. So when I was resting from my physical training, I was at work with my mental training. The key blade technique was surprisingly simple to replicate. The only difficult part was the amount of focus it took to keep it contained at a single part of my body. But to skewer an asshole for a few seconds, I think I can manage. I forcibly removed my key blade from the freakishly skinny-looking alien's neck, causing blue blood to spurt onto my face. Note to self: get checked out at the medical bay as soon as I return to planet Vegeta. I quickly turn over to my ship and see that the other alien was sitting in the cockpit. I calmly walk towards the cockpit, hearing what sounds like the alien humming some sort of tune. It's oddly familiar, but I don't think much about it. Did you finish checking in with command? He asked without turning around, not realizing that it wasn't his friend. Giving no reply, I grab the back of the seat and spin it around. As he spun around, I jumped onto his lap and grabbed him by the throat. Without saying a word, I put gradually apply more and more pressure on his neck before it snaps like a twig. I hopped off the corpse and watched as it fell to the ground. Funny. I expected that I would feel something after my first kill. Is my Saiyan biology the cause for this as well, or am I just that fucked up? My sense of empathy in my past life was not really that prevalent. You could tell me about a person who had the most heinous things done to them and I genuinely didn't care. I cared for some people, obviously. My mother and best friend mostly, but anyone else I couldn't give any less of a shit. Is my lack of regret caused by my past life? Or my basic Saiyan biology? Doesn't really matter to me all that much, but I am curious as to which is the answer. Seeing no point of continuing this train of thought, I kicked the alien's corpse out of my ship and walked outside. I closely examined the alien life forms, seeing their light blue complexion and elongated limbs. They also looked amphibious in a way. Also, the IR way of talking reminds me of the Solarians from the Mass Effect series. The weapons that they were using were of no consequence, but I threw them into the ship nonetheless, just in case some Saiyan scientist wanted to see what made them tick. Now, where were you two going? I muttered to myself as I closed my eyes and searched for the nearest cluster of power levels. I could sense a group of about 10,000 or so about 3 miles west of here. The number was surprisingly small. It made me all the more curious when I didn't sense any others on the planet either. Especially since the data on the ship's computer had said that they were supposed to be a technologically advanced species. I ultimately decide not to think too much about it. Fewer number of inhabitants, the less amount of time I have to spend on this shithole of a planet. As another precaution, I took another senzu bean and held it in my mouth. While I would rather not consume one senzu after another, I really had no choice other than this in case of an emergency. The reason for my apprehension was due to the fact that senzu beans didn't just heal you, they also caused you to feel full for a maximum of 10 days. Obviously no one took Saiyan metabolism into account, but I would still feel full for at least a day or two depending on how hard I trained. I experimented with taking 2 senzu beans one after the other. And it was as if my stomach was on the brink of bursting open. That was a very uncomfortable 12 hours. Nonetheless, it was needed in the event another worst-case scenario. After preparing myself, I flew into the air with an impressive burst of speed that surprised even me. That's when I had realized that I had gotten a boost from the Zenkai I had just received from my near-death experience. I was tempted to check how much stronger I had gotten exactly, but I put it on hold for now. If these aliens reversed engineered all the technology they could gather from the previous Saiyan infiltration squads, then they would have access to the same technology used in our scouters. For now, I kept my power level at the lowest I could possibly keep it and flew towards what I hoped was their main city. I have to admit, the alien city is really something to behold. Nothing on the entirety of planet Vegeta could ever come remotely close to this. I can see several small skyscrapers, all of which were surrounding one very large skyscraper that was directly in the middle of the city. The lights that shone through the night were honestly very beautiful. One could almost compare it to a faraway picture New York. Only this New York was considerably smaller. But even with its size being probably a tenth of New York, this city could easily hold 10 times that much. It makes no sense. Why can I only sense around 10,000 people here? Could the previous Saiyan infiltration squads have been more successful as we thought? I flew in the direction of the giant skyscraper in the middle of the city. As I grew closer, I noticed that the people here seemed to have a gloomy atmosphere about them. I would usually write it off as something inconsequential, but considering that it seems to affect everyone here, I can only imagine some type of event happened that caused them to be like this. My theory of the Saiyan infiltration squads having been somewhat successful in conquering the planet seemed more and more likely. But there was one problem with the theory so far. There was no damage anywhere. Whenever a squad of Saiyans arrive at a planet, there's usually only one method that they use in order to conquer it. And that was basically scorched earth. They would turn an entire city into a glass floor until they had no doubt that absolutely nothing survived. There's hardly any other method that Saiyans would use. Sometimes they would be tasked to retrieve a piece of technology, but those missions usually came from someone higher up in the Frieza force. As far as I know, there isn't any technology that was tasked for retrieval. Which would mean that the scorched earth policy was in place when the other teams arrived. If the other Saiyans weren't the cause of their small numbers or their obvious depressing state, then I don't know what is. I guess that's a question I'll just have to save for later. I said to myself before flying above the tallest skyscraper. I looked down at the building below me, smirking at the idea that had just popped into my head. I've never tried using this technique before, so my stance would probably need to be corrected. But I don't think I could call myself a Dragon Ball fan if I don't try it at least once. I put my hands together, leaving a gap in between and bringing them to my side. Ka-mi. A dark purple ball of ki starts to form in the gap between my hands. Ha-mi. The ball of ki grows bigger and bigger, now letting off small beams of ki in every direction. Before I could shoot off the Kamehameha wave, some sort of elector IC dome surrounded the roof of the skyscraper and shocks me with a very high voltage of electricity. Ah-ag. The pain was so immense that I dropped out of the sky and onto my hands and knees, smoke coming off my body. I suddenly feel something wrap itself around me and pulling me into the air, whilst also keeping my arms at my sides. What the hell? I groaned, looking down at whatever it was that kept me restrained. When I looked down I saw 2 yellow rings around me, the look of them reminding me of Gotenk's Galactic Donut technique. You were being contained in a stasis field. I heard a voice speak out from above. I look up and see 5 of the same aliens that I had encountered at my ship. They were all using some kind of vehicle to hover above the ground. 4 of the aliens had on some fancy-looking red robes while the one in the middle had on a blue robe. We theorized that if another one of your species were to make it this far into the city that they would aim for where they could cause the most damage. The alien who was in the middle of the group told me. Their vehicle, that looked more like a giant hoverboard when I got a closer look at it, floated down towards the roof, allowing all of them to step down and walk towards me. While I admit that your species has tremendous power, your mental capacity has much to be desired. She had added. Besides their differing blue and purple skin, I couldn't actually tell which member of their species were male or female. Well, I'm so sorry that my species is such a disappointment to you, I said sarcastically whilst rolling my eyes. What is even the point of this? He could have killed me by now, but instead it's choosing to speak to me. If it was interested in speaking, why would those soldiers from earlier shoot me on sight? It's actually quite the opposite. In fact, he leaned down and picked something off the ground, showing it to me and revealing that it was a senzu bean. I checked my mouth immediately for the one I had put there, but didn't feel it anywhere. It must have came out when I was screaming out in pain earlier. So that's why they are choosing to talk now. I remember from earlier that the Oath Ur-2 aliens were talking about looking for some medical mechines to help with their medical systems. I'm very curious as to how your weak-minded species was able to manufacture such a powerful healing agent, he says, taking out a remote and pressing a button. Their vehicle flies up and projects a video onto the roof of the skyscraper. Looking at it closely, I see that it was actually a video of the encounter I had with 2 aliens at my ship. Body cams. No, the placement of these shots are too high for that. Their movement is also very odd. It's almost as if they are wait. Do these creatures implant micro cameras into the eyes of their soldiers? Shit, I should have just turned their bodies to ash instead of leaving the corpses. Then again, the footage that was captured was probably the only reason that they're keeping me alive at this point. I don't know whether I should be disappointed in my lack of caution or relieved that it's somehow gotten me in a situation that is better than the alternative. As you can see, you were shot by one of our snipers in the heart. I'm sure I don't need to remind you. Although, you seem to be surprisingly mobile for one that's supposed to be dead. I picked this footage apart very carefully to find out how you were able to walk away from such an injury. My heart is on the other side of my chest. Seems they just disposed of the bodies of the other Saiyans instead of dissecting them. Odd, I would have expected them to try and learn everything about us by any means necessary. Especially after the whole eye cameras thing, but something he said caught my attention for a bit. He went through the footage carefully. That footage couldn't have been captured more than 10 minutes ago. How in the world did you manage to pick it apart enough in that small amount of time? It's very difficult for anyone not experienced enough with subtle movements to make out, but you swallowed something when our soldiers were examining you. You then took out our soldiers with ease. And even more importantly, without any damage on your person. Later on, you put this into your mouth before disembarking from your ship and flying towards our city. While he was spouting off his monologue, I focused my energy into my mouth, trying to successfully make my only shot of getting out of this mess. It was not going to be a clean infiltration, but it's not like I have many other options. It's this or Kaioken, and the latter isn't exactly good at keeping me alive either. The alien walked up to me, holding the senzu bean right in my face. What is this? Damn it, it's almost ready. I just needed a few more seconds until I can fire it off. Why couldn't you have monologued some more? Silence will get you nowhere, Saiyan. I suggest that you cooperate. Having no other option, I decided to stay silent. The alien looks at me for a moment before letting out a sigh and walking back towards his group. I wish that you would have just cooperated. I do not take any pleasure in any of this. But you have brought this upon yourself, Saiyan. It presses another button on the remote it had in its hand, causing electricity to shoot out from my restraints and into my body. I could only groan out in pain. Trying to keep my mouth closed as opening it would have tipped them off to my plan if they had seen any of the other Saiyans use it before. What is it? It repeats. Again I don't answer. And again I'm shocked by electricity. This time it felt even worse than the others. Each time that you insist on remaining silent, I will increase the voltage more and more. Now tell me what I want to know and I promise that you will not suffer any more pain. I keep silent for a second, almost causing the alien to press the button again, but I let out a grunt to stop it from doing so. Will you comply? I nodded and it lowered the remote. It moved closer yet again, almost face to face with me now. I let a smile grow on my face, a white light shining from in between my teeth. The look of shock on the alien's face was priceless as I looked towards the sky and shot a power ball out of my mouth. The group of aliens looked up at the white sphere in shock for a moment. Before running towards the vehicle that they arrived in, but by the time it had lowered itself back onto the roof. Burst open and mix. Everything hurts. That was my first immediate thought after waking up inside what looked to be a giant crater. I tried to stand up, but I heard a sudden crack come from my back before a jolt of pain laid me back down on the ground. Seeing that I couldn't move, I decided to try and sense around for any high power levels in my immediate surroundings, but I felt nothing. Not a single key signature for miles. After feeling that there was no danger, I relaxed. And laid in the crater for I don't even know how long. As I laid there, I noticed that the blue clouds that were previously overhead were now covered by a thick cloud of smoke and embers. I could hear what sounded like flames crackling close by. The atmosphere was unsettling, to say the least. Knowing that there was no sign of life for miles while being all alone inside a destroyed city. It eventually became too much to think about, as I painfully reached my hand out and summoned the pouch of unlimited senzu beans. I took one out and ate it, recovering back to full strength. I put the pouch back into the ring and jumped out of the crater, seeing the city that I had destroyed. The numerous skyscrapers that were there previously were replaced with nothing but an empty landscape. The remains of a few skyscrapers were still visible, but besides that, there was nothing else to indicate that there was ever a city here to begin with. I knew that becoming a great ape would cause me to lose control and wreak nothing but havoc on anything in sight, but this is something that I honestly never expected. The amount of destruction that I've wrought honestly left me in shock. I flew up into the air to get a better look at the carnage, but I noticed something when I did. The crater that I had been laying in wasn't a crater at all. It was a giant footprint. So this is the power of a great ape. I knew that even Saiyan babies were capable of conquering planets just by going great ape, but to actually see it for myself. It was amazing. And to think that I would eventually eclipse his level of power once I achieve Super Saiyan. It's funny to think that great ape will become nothing but a useless transformation after seeing all that's left of this city, but I guess that just goes to show how unbelievably broken Saiyans are. A whole species of people who have the potential to rival gods. But I'm a long way from that at the moment. I said to myself as I looked towards my hand. Should I transform again? I don't know when I'll have another shot at mastering the Great Ape form. If I return to planet Vegeta now, it's a possibility that Bardock or King Vegeta would want me to work on controlling my Great Ape form. But the problem with that is my current power level. When I healed myself with a Senzu Bean earlier, it gave me a small Zenkai on top of the considerably larger Zenkai I had received when I was almost killed during my landing. My scouter had broken during my time transformed, so I didn't have an exact number, but I can confidently say that my power level is close or even higher than 20,000. Ancient Saiyans have double the normal Saiyan multipliers. If I transform with my current power level, that's a Great Ape with a power level of 400,000. If I went back and they forced me to transform, there's no one on planet Vegeta that would be able to stop me from rampaging. Seeing no other alternative, I form a power ball in my hands and get ready to fire it up into the sky. On the bright side, this might give me some insight into how I can possibly master the other transformations. Burst open and mix. A week. I spent an entire week on this day. Olate planet and I'm still no closer to mastering Great Ape. I have no idea how to go about mastering the form. I black out every time that I've entered my Great Ape state and can't remember a damn thing from my time transformed. How the hell am I supposed to master a form if I can't remember being in it? There was a time where I was semi-conscious during the transformation, but that was yesterday. Why and I haven't been able to replicate that moment since. I'm momentarily snapped out of my frustration when I hear an alert coming from the ship's console. I head over and see what the issue was and saw that it was a call from my father. Zylf. I heard him. I found out during my week-long training session on the ship that it had a long-range communicator. There wasn't any video so I couldn't see his face, but there was audio. I'm here. Are Mother and Raditz there too? I asked. No, it's just me. I wanted to know how your training is coming along. He answered. Horribly. I'm still having the same problem. I told him. He let out a sigh. Sorry, but I can't help you with this. Exposure to the form is the best way to gain control, but for some reason yours is taking a lot longer than expected. It's most likely due to my ancient Saiyan heritage. I doubt it would be anything else. This is such a pain in the ass, I groaned. Watch your language. I heard my mother yell out all of a sudden. I damn near fell out of my seat from how loud she was. Christ, do anime women just have megaphones lodged into their throats that they turn on when they want to shout at people? I thought you said Mother wasn't there. I exclaimed as I rubbed my poor ringing ears. She wasn't. She just walked in. Bardock replied. Of course she walks in at the worst time. Second life mother or not, she's still technically my mother. How are you doing, sweetie? Are you on your way home yet? She asked. No, mother. I'm still struggling to gain control over Great Ape. I answered. Ever since I extended my stay on this planet to train, Jine has been pestering me about when I will be returning home. I know that I'm her son and all, but damn. I just conquered an alien planet, I'm pretty sure I can take care of myself for a few extra days. Or possibly weeks or months considering how little progress I'm making. I wish you didn't need that stupid transformation, she muttered under her breath. Why can I picture the pout that she has on her face right now? I know. I'll be back before. Zyeok. Mom, I can't hear you. I say as I try to clear up the signal. The call starts to break and soon devolves into static. I slam my fist onto the main panel of the ship, putting a small dent into it and causing the buttons to momentarily flicker. As much as I hate to admit it, these calls from my family have been therapeutic during my time struggling with this transformation. A small break in between constant failure. I find myself missing home, my family, the longer I am out here. My family. For the longest time, I've just considered them characters in an anime. This is the first time I've ever considered them as my actual family. It's strange. The longer I'm in this universe, the more I slowly start to realize that what previously fictional are now living and breathing. I shake my head and give my cheeks a slight pat, taking myself out of this train of thought. I have to train, I mutter to myself before standing up and walking out of my ship. It's been a few days since communication with my family has gone down. So far, I've made slight, but noticeable progress with my Great Ape transformation. I'm now fully conscious during the process, but it's like I see red almost constantly. It's almost as if I'm a passenger in my own body. I hate it, but there's nothing I can do but ride out the storm. Ever since my reincarnation, it's been nothing but training. And while I actually enjoy the feeling of my power growing and expanding, mastering transformations is nothing like my usual training. Just keep transforming, Zioth. Eventually you'll be able to control it. My father's voice rang out in my head. Ah, yes. Just keep doing something over and over expecting a different result. It's almost as if the entire Saiyan race was made to try and contradict the definition of insanity. The thing is, it's the only method that actually works. God, I need a break, I groaned to myself. Rubbing the sides of my temple with ever-growing frustration, I get up and fly back towards the ruins of the destroyed city. There were a few buildings just barely left standing that I could explore. I needed something different than the constant routine of transforming, waiting to revert to normal, flying back to my ship, sleeping for a few hours and waking up to repeat the cycle all over again. After about a minute, I landed in the middle of the destroyed city and looked around at the remaining buildings to see if any of them looked important. The tall building in the middle of the city was still standing surprisingly, even though I had transformed directly on top of it. It wasn't exactly standing as tall as it used to, but I don't think it'll fall if I started poking through its remains. At least I don't think it will. I'm a warrior, not an architect. There's a reason that I didn't end up in classroom of the elite. Amid the ruins of the derelict a structure was a whole lot of nothing and whole lot more dust. I assumed as much, but I can't say that I'm not a little disappointed. For a race that prided itself on being smart, they sure didn't say to come up with a strategy in the case that we actually succeeded in taking over. The basement, I muttered with realization as rolled my eyes at my own stupidity. I jump out of a window and fall towards the ground floor. Slowing my descent a few seconds before I hit the ground, I look at all the rubble covering the floor and look up towards the unstable structure and come to the conclusion that I wouldn't like to know what it feels like being buried alive. Well, blasting my way through is out. If pulling a Vegeta is out, then what else can I do? I rack my mind up and down to try and remember anything that could help when I suddenly remember something that Goku did once and then never used again. I hold out my hand and concentrate my ki on the rubble in front of me. I feel a warm sensation on my hand and hear the rubble in front of me start to move. Opening my eyes, I see that my dark purple ki had formed a thin layer around my hand and that a few sizable chunks of rubble in front of me had begun to float. That was a lot easier than I thought it would be, I muttered to myself in a little bit of surprise. I thought telekinesis would take me at least an hour to get a grasp of, but apparently not. It was a lot simpler than one would think. Shaking off how surprisingly easy it was, I used my newfound technique to clear away the remaining rubble. After clearing about 70% of the debris, I found a small hatch built into the floor. Jackpot. I pry the hatch off its hinges, as it had been damaged shut from the debris, and form a sphere of ki in my hand. I stretch out my hand and let the light emanating from the ki sphere shine on the darkness inside. I see a ladder leading down into more darkness and groan. This is slowly turning into a horror film, I mutter before letting out a sigh. I close my eyes and take a few deep breaths before jumping down into the abyss. I fall for a few seconds before I finally hit the floor, sensing nothing out of the ordinary. Taking a few steps, I was suddenly hit by this rancid smell that made me want to vomit. I put more energy into the ki sphere and illuminate more of the room around me. There was a bunch of small pillars in the floor that seemed to give off a similar appearance to a server room. There were also a few bodies on the floor that seemed to have been down here for quite a while. I guess you all were the cause of that smell. I groan as I kneel down and take a look at one of the bodies. Turning it onto its back, I see that the body seemed to have been disemboweled. My eyes narrow in confusion and curiosity before I lean in closer to examine the body more carefully. Are those teeth marks? I ask myself. Die, Saiyan. Without even turning my head towards the voice, I quickly stretch out my arm and release a small beam from my finger. With my head finally catching up to my arm, I see one of those amphibious aliens stagger backwards, holding its chest where my beam had hit it. I get to my feet and fire almost a dozen more beams before it dropped onto its knees and fell dead on the floor. As it fell, I hear something metallic also hit the floor and see a metal pole roll away from its body. Fucking piece of, I grit my teeth and blast its body with a dozen more shots before turning away and continuing my search for the basement. At the end of the long and dark room, there was a sizable computer with a bunch of buttons with alien script. Great. So even if I hadn't knocked out the power to everything, it seems as though there wouldn't be any way for me to access the servers anyway. I guess I'll just leave a beacon for the Saiyan salvage team to come recover everything here. Even if there was something useful on all of these drives, I would know until the salvage team recovers all this data and deciphers the language. I shake my head in frustration before turning to leave. While this probably wasn't a big waste of time, I still couldn't help but feel as though it was. I let off a yellow beam attack from my mouth and encapsulating a random distant plateau in the resulting explosion and destroying it. After almost a month, I was finally able to get a handle on my Great Ape transformation. It took a mind-boggling amount of transforming, but eventually I was able to transform without going into a berserker rage-type state. And dear Lord, it was worth it. The power, strength and speed that comes with the form is immense. I would never expected something as massive as the Great Ape would move as fast as it does. Couple the speed with the power and you basically have a walking, and sometimes talking, weapon of mass extinction. Barring Kryptonians and frost demons, it's no wonder why Saiyans are considered one of the most overpowered species in fiction. If this is what a times 20 multiplier feels like, I can't even fathom what the times 100 multiplier my Super Saiyan form is going to be. I spent the next few hours training in my Uzaru state. While it wasn't that effective to raise my power level, getting used to the massive difference in size and power was a must. It was also important to see how long I can maintain the transformation. Just because I can control it doesn't mean that I've mastered it. After finishing up training for the day, I returned to the ship and shut the door behind me. I lay down on the thin, but surprisingly comfortable bed and let out a tired sigh. I can understand now why Goku always seemed to be unconscious after transforming. Because while Great Ape was a significant boost, it was also incredibly draining. The reason could stem from the fact that I'm still young, or simply because I just lacked experience. Either way, it's going to take time. Time that I don't have. Yesterday, I received a transmission from King Vegeta ordering me to leave the planet and journey back to planet Vegeta. While I was a little disappointed at the fact that I couldn't continue training my Great Ape form, I had achieved my original goal of maintaining my sense of reason whilst transformed, so I couldn't complain all that much. Still, I would have liked to remain here a little longer. Training in a desolate environment is actually quite soothing. After meditating for a few hours, I walked towards the ship's computer and set a course to planet Vegeta. Letting out a sigh, I wait until I leave the planet's atmosphere before contacting home. This is Saiyan Infiltration Team. I pause for a second, and think back. Now that I think about it, they never assigned me an infiltration number. Black. I facepalm at my own lack of creativity. I've never been good at coming up with names. Seems that trait followed me into this life. Team Black. What the hell kind of name is that? The Saiyan on the other end of the line asks. Never mind that. Planet N937 has been successfully acquired and the residents exterminated. A beacon has also been placed at a place of interest for scientists. I informed him of everything. Copy. We'll send a Saiyan recovery team. I assume that you're on your way back. He asked. Affirmative. I nod, not that he could see it. All right then, good work. Team Black, he says in a mocking tone before I cut off the communication. Rubbing my eyes, I groan and walk back towards the bed. I'm too tired at the moment to be embarrassed. The journey home was unsurprisingly uneventful. The silence of the vacuum of space was overwhelming. I mostly filled the time with training and meditation, even managing to almost double the weight of the bands I placed on my arms. Surprisingly, I didn't seem to notice the silence when training, only when sleeping and eating. I wonder sometimes if I was just hyper-focused on training that my mind blocked out everything else. Or if it was my new Saiyan mind that was responsible. I find myself wondering about that as well. Were all these things that I'm noticing about myself because I was now a Saiyan or because always this and just never realized until now? It was a useless thing to think about, but there's not much else I can do in this situation. I'm literally left with nothing but my thoughts. I give my cheeks some light pats and let out a sigh. I get up and use Kekai to summon my weighted bands. I got about a week and a half left of unrestricted training. I need to stop thinking about such trivial things and use my time wisely. The ship's hull burns as I enter the atmosphere of planet Vegeta. I was only gone for 3 months, but when I saw the barren rocky landscape after pushing through the clouds, I couldn't help but find myself smiling at the fact that I had returned home. It was a strange feeling, but not at all unwelcome. I land at the landing pad designated for all Saiyan ship re-entries and get out of my seat, ready to disembark. Once outside, I take in a deep breath and stretch out my arms and legs. The ship wasn't all that small, but I couldn't help but feel as though it was restricting me. Zylf. I hear a familiar voice call out and see my mother and little brother running towards me with big smiles. My father was walking behind them, shaking his head at their theatrics. I could see the small but proud smirk that he had on his face. I follow his lead and shake my head softly, couldn't help the small smile that made its way to my face at the sight of them. Yo! I greeted them with a small wave. My mother immediately pulled me into a tight hug while Radist and Bardock stood off to the side. While I was a little surprised at the sudden embrace, I quickly shook it off and hugged her back. Welcome back, she whispered in my ear softly. I see a few bystanders sending me teasing looks, but I wrote them off as soon as I saw them. I learned a long time ago to never take a mother's affection for granted. After a few seconds, she released me from her embrace, giving Raditz the opportunity to run up and start shooting off rapid-fire questions. What was it like? What did you see? Did you kill them all? Did you get stronger? Did you rip out one of their spines and impaled another one with it? That last one was oddly specific. I didn't get the chance to answer him though, as someone had cleared their throat in an obvious attempt to grab our attention. Looking over, I saw that Colonel Paragus was standing beside my father. Zylf. He greeted with a nod. Colonel Paragus. I greeted back, taking a few steps towards the man. King Vegeta. He nods, motioning for me to follow. He's waiting in the throne room as we speak. I let out a sigh and nod my head. I was hoping for a few hours of downtime before I was eventually summoned, but I guess there's no time like the present. Give me a moment. I walk back to my ship and grab the blasters that I had thrown into it almost 2 months ago. Alright, let's not keep His Majesty waiting. Paragus raises an eyebrow at the peculiar-looking blasters, but says nothing about them and turns to lead me to the throne room. I'll be back home soon, I say to my family as I give them a small, but reassuring smile. They nod at my statement and watch as I follow Paragus towards the king's castle. As we entered He castle and ascended the stairs to the throne room, I couldn't help but feel an uneasy amount of tension radiating from the colonel. Colonel Paragus, you seem unusually tense, I commented, not wanting to beat around the bush. He glanced back at me with an unreadable expression and nodded. Before sending me to collect you, King Vegeta ordered me to bring him my son. Paragus replied. Broly is waiting for us in the throne room, along with a few other Saiyan warriors. I can't tell if that was a good thing or not. King Vegeta's motives so far have left me more perplexed than I would like to admit. At first I thought he was sending me to my death when he ordered me to conquer a planet that multiple Saiyan infiltration teams had died on. But then the ordering of Bardock to teach me the POW or ball made no sense if his goal was my death. And up until that moment, King Vegeta seemed to be interested in nurturing my growth, even after the birth of his son 2 years ago. Then there was Rent's situation of me walking into the throne room where there are a number of Saiyan warriors waiting for us, along with Broly. At this point, I'm expecting either a celebration upon our arrival or a Jujutsu Kaisen-style jumping. Upon entering the throne room, I saw a very nervous Broly standing in the middle of the hall surrounded by 6 Saiyan warriors that were standing off to the side. Their power levels weren't that high, the strongest one clocking in at around 6 or 7,000. Oddly enough, that one looked fairly familiar for some strange reason. Upon seeing us enter, Broly looked towards his father with a relieved expression and waited for us walk towards him before hiding behind his father's leg. I see you've returned home with no issues, King Vegeta said suddenly, yes looking towards me with his usual blank gaze. I've heard from Bardock that you have gained control over the Great Ape. Yes, King Vegeta, I replied as I kneeled down. As much as I hate this mindless posturing, I needed to give off the impression that I'm still loyal to the king to a fault. It was strange. Before, I didn't really mind. But after growing stronger than him, I find myself growing more and more irritated by the fact that I'm bowing to him. Good. I've always liked that ambitious nature of yours, Xylth. So much so that I'll overlook the fact that you deliberately chose to prolong your mission on planet N937. He said, his lips turning upward into a small smirk. Thank you, King Vegeta. I'm not worthy of your generosity. Make no mistake, this will not happen again. He said, his tone leaving no room for debate. Now, what is that you have in your hands? I hold up the alien blasters I had been carrying up in clear view for the king. These are alien weapons that I had taken off the bodies of the inhabitants of planet N937. I thought that since they had taken out multiple teams of Saiyans, scientists here would like to study them. I answered quickly and efficiently. The king waved his hand and a few of the lower-powered Saiyans came and collected the 2 blasters from me. Excellent work. You didn't just think of advancing your own power, but the power of our military. You are more than meeting my expectations of you. The king stated. Thank you for your words of praise, Your Majesty. Now, on to more pressing matters. I believe that I had given you my word on a certain issue. Before I could speak up, Paragus decided to butt in headfirst into the conversation like an absolute fool. Yes, Your Majesty. You gave your word that Brawly will. Silence. The moment that word came out of the king's mouth, the tension in the room grew so thick that no one dared to utter a damn syllable. One more interruption, Colonel Paragus, and you will not live to see the outcome of this decision. The king said, sending an intense glare towards Paragus. Paragus quickly dropped to one knee beside me and dropped his head low. Apologies, my liege, he muttered. King Vegeta scoffed before his eyes looked back towards me. Are you certain that you'll be able to control this boy? A bunch of images flew through my mind as I thought about how loaded of a question that was. That's the 10 million Zenny question. Would I be able to control Brawly if he ever got out of hand? Now, I probably can. His power level managed to overload a scouter, but I'm 90%. NT sure that the scouter he overloaded was a first-generation scouter. Those could only read up to about 30,000 before blowing up. The problem was that I couldn't be certain that it was a first general. If it was a second generation, I would be severely fucked. Those things managed to read power level up to 100,000 and higher. If Brawly managed to go wrathful with a power level that destroyed a second-generation scouter, then my previous statement of being severely fucked would be an understatement. The only way I would survive would be to use Kai Kai to get me as far away from him as possible. Shit, I did not think this through all the way when I initially wanted to take him under my wing. I'm 100% certain, King Vegeta. I lied directly to his face. The king stared at me for a few seconds before nodding his head. Then I'll leave the boy in your care for the time being. I let out a small breath of relief, but it was immediately cut short when the king started to talk again. But seeing as you're so confident, I'm sure you'll have no problem having another child in your care. He said with a scheming smile. Your Majesty, I asked with a face that nothing but confusion written all over it. The king stood up and motioned for us to follow him. After about a minute, we arrived at the royal training ground where there was a small child training by the striking the air. A very familiar-looking child. Vegeta, the king called out. Oh no. The boy stopped immediately and ran over to us, standing beside his father. King Vegeta knelt down and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. This is my son, though I'm sure you could tell. He said, looking at him with pride before looking towards me. I'll be assigning him to you as well. Your Majesty, I'm sorry, but I must object. I don't know who that was, but thank you. Seems like someone here besides me has some sense. You shouldn't leave the prince in the hands of a weak child. I take it back. Someone apparently wants to head off into the otherworld earlier than they were supposed to. It seems you have objections about my decision, Nappa. King Vegeta looked at the bulky Saiyan with unpleased eyes. Nappa. No wonder that guy looked so familiar. I couldn't really recognize him due to the fact that he still had hair. Looking at him more closely, he definitely made the right choice going bald. Your Majesty, leave Prince Vegeta in my care. I swear that I will make him into a fine warrior. Nappa requested as he knelt on the ground. Yes, please, take him off me. I don't need another child to take care of. Brawly would be a handful all on his own. And you think that you'll be a better teacher than Xylth? The king asked. I know it. The prince will only grow weaker under his tutelage. Nappa declared. My brow twitches in anger, but I stop myself from pulling a Vegeta and just let this situation play out. With any luck, this entire situation will end with Nappa taking over as teacher for the Prince of No One. The king looked at Nappa and then turned his gaze towards me. He thinks to himself for a few seconds before his lips turn to upwards into a smirk. I suppose you two will just have to settle this the old-fashioned way. I see Nappa glaring at me from across the arena. I roll my eyes at the buffed-up Baldy before letting out a groan. My family surrounded me with various degrees of emotion. My parents trying to talk me out of doing what they believed to be suicide. I don't know why, since this wasn't a battle to the death, but it didn't seem to matter to them. The only one who seemed to think that I wasn't in any danger was Raditz. It was most likely because of his idolization of me, making him think that I was infallible, but I'll take the vote of confidence nonetheless. Xylth, are you sure you want to do this? Nappa isn't some low-ranking Saiyan. My father asked, his gaze having a small hint of worry. That's right. You don't have to do this, Xylth. Bardock can just go and talk to the king. I'm sure we can figure something out. My worried mother said, kneeling down and placing her hands on my shoulder. I smile a small bit before gently removing her hands from my person. I turn towards Raditz and see him looking up at me with nothing but sheer belief. I ruffle his hair before looking back towards Nappa and stretching out my arms and legs. It's fine. Trust me. This won't take long, I told them. Bardock grips onto my shoulder and looks me in the eyes. Don't underestimate him. You may be slightly stronger than him at the moment, but he has years of experience to back it up. I had to hold myself back from a chuckle when he had said, slightly stronger. At this point in time, I'm over 3 times stronger than Nappa was during Saiyan Saga. Considering that Saiyans, especially Saiyan elites, don't really seem to train, I'm sure he's around the same power level. He's possibly even a couple hundred numbers weaker. Don't worry, he won't beat me. I reply with a smirk. Bardock stared at me as if trying to ascertain whether I was being confident or just plain arrogant. After seemingly finding what he had wanted, he closed his eyes and let out a tired sigh before relinquishing his grip. Go, before I change my mind, he said. Bardock, my mother exclaimed, obviously not pleased with his decision. He looked towards Jine and shook his head. Her eyes widened before looking down at the floor with sadness but also reluctant acceptance. When I saw the look on my mother's face, there was only one thought immediately blew through my mind. I am going to beat the absolute shit out of Nappa. I stand in the middle of the arena, facing down Nappa as a crowd of Saiyans start taking bets on which one of us will win. Apparently, to the people running this little wager, there was 100/1 odds of me winning. They had given out our power level numbers and the number of planets we had conquered. Since they used the power level read from the throne room 3 months ago, me and Nappa were said to be equal, with me being stronger than him by a little less than 100. And while we were equal in that regard, we were definitely not equal in terms of experience. The number of planets conquered by Nappa far exceeded my single conquest by about 300. By the looks of him, he had about 40 or 50 years on me, so it was to be expected. You should just give up, Nappa suddenly said, grabbing my attention away from the overzealous crowd of Saiyans. There's no shame in running away with your tail tucked between your legs. God, I want to knock that mocking smile off his face. There's literally nothing more shameful for a Saiyan than backing down from a fight. Say what you want about Vegeta and his pride, but when you're a Saiyan born and raised on planet Vegeta, you finally start to understand why he always spouted on about his Saiyan pride. We are a race of warriors born and raised for battle and conquest. I understand now why Vegeta prides himself on being the prince of all Saiyans even though the Saiyan race was basically extinct. When you're raised like a Saiyan, that pride ingrains itself into you like a white-hot brand on your soul. So when he told me to run with my tail tucked in between my legs, my Saiyan pride flared inside of me, wanting nothing more than to beat him into the ground. More than I already wanted to, that is. Before I could retort, the royal family had finally come out, which silenced the crowd of rambunctious Saiyans almost immediately. When I had set eyes upon them, couldn't help but find myself marveling at the beautiful Saiyan woman that stood beside the king. It was at that moment that I had come to a startling realization and quickly subverted my gaze. That was Vegeta's mother I was just ogling. I didn't even think Vegeta had a mother. I mean, it obviously makes sense that he does, but I've never seen her until now. Jesus Christ, did the king score a home run with her? That face alongside her cold stare made me think that she was a woman who can and will kill you in about 1,000 different ways. Which was basically my type. I don't know why, but a man who can kill you whilst not giving 1 ounce of a shit was basically the epitome of my hotness scale. Kinda reminds me of certain blonde android. Zylf Nappa, are you both ready to begin? The king asked. Yes, your majesty. Nappa exclaimed. I give the king a nod of my head. There wasn't any decorum expected of me here. This was an arena, not a throne room. Then let the battle commence. The king shouted. As soon as the king had shouted that out, the crowd went crazy once more, some even shouting various things that they wanted to see Nappa break in my body. With a cocky smirk, Nappa spread his arms wide and started to talk. Come on, kid, I'll even let you have the first. I speed blitz in front of Nappa faster than he could even compute and punch him hard enough to send him flying into the arena's rock wall. The arena and all of its inhabitants went silent. So silent that you could hear a pin drop. They just saw a 4-year-old child embed a Saiyan elite into a wall. And the king's jaw had dropped at the display, which greatly surprised his wife. There were only a handful few times when her husband has had that look on his face, and it usually came from a meeting with Frieza or Lord Beerus. What's wrong, dear? Sella asked her husband. After a few seconds, the king finally seemed to process the question and answered. I couldn't follow his movements at all. I didn't even see him move until Nappa was blown away. That statement surprised not just Sella, but the young prince as well. If his father couldn't see Zylf's movements, doesn't that mean that Zylf was stronger than his father? And even with the royal family's reaction, they still weren't the most shocked out of all those witness to this event. That belonged to Zylf's own family, who couldn't even fathom the strength that he had. Well, all except for one of them. Fuck yeah, kick his ass, bro. I look at my hand and flex it a little bit. He was sturdier than I thought he was going to be. I guess all that muscle really is good for something. I knew Nappa wasn't down and out just yet. I had purposely lowered the strength of that punch specifically so he didn't get knocked unconscious. I also knew that he wasn't out because I could feel his power level rising from Nappa's shaped hole in the wall. He suddenly shot out from the hole, his eyes filled with nothing but anger as he screamed from the top of his lungs. Ubraaaaat. Well, looks like someone got a rage boost. I waited until he was directly in front of me before kicking his chin and sending him up into the air. Inishan appeared directly into his turbulent path before locking my fingers together and striking him in the dead center of his back, causing him to spit out a mixture of blood and saliva. The force the sledgehammer sends him barreling back into the ground, leaving him lying motionless in the center of a crater. I slowly fly back down and land beside his body. I give him a small kick on the side, and hear him groan in pain. Oh good, I thought I might have accidentally killed him. Although by the way that bruise on his back is already starting to form, I'd say that I definitely broke his back. Fractured it at the very least. It was interesting. That rage boost put him around 10,000. Still about 14,000 too short to do anything to me, but hey, at least he tried. I hear Nappa groan in pain. Once again, and I look around at the arena, seeing that no one was doing, nor saying, anything. They just sat there with shocked expressions. Is someone going to help him? The end.